Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Hey, you guys. It's Lynda Lippin, your host for the Pilates Goddess podcast, and I am so thrilled to welcome you back. Here we are, season 2, episode 1. It's actually, I think, the 91st episode of this podcast altogether, which is a little crazy to me, but here we are. So it's the end of August, and I promised you I would restart the podcast in August, and I like to be a little bit true to my word on that one. I apologize for it taking me a little while, but I've had just a lot going on. So before I start talking about today's interesting topic, especially for newer Pilates teachers, I want to just share a little bit about what's been going on with me personally. So as of today, and I am recording this on Sunday, August 27th, So as of today, I am teaching a little bit back in the studio, and that is super exciting. I am teaching as a master teacher employee at Bombshell Pilates, which is on 20th Street here in Manhattan, between 6th and 7th Avenue. And I am also renting space for my personal clients, both at Bombshell and at Grasshopper Pilates, which my friend Gina owns, which is in Soho, Broadway between Prince and Houston. So if you are around New York or coming to New York and you've been kind of interested in working with me, but really wanted to work with me in person on all of the apparatus, hit me up. You can email me, Lynda@lyndalippin.com, and I will get right back to you with all the information that you need. My husband came out of retirement. He's actually working for Wegmans now. So thank God we have great health insurance now. And some other benefits that we have never had before in our lives. So that's very, very exciting. And, just takes some of the pressure off of the kind of back end of just, living in the United States and living in New York City. So I'm very excited about those things. I am continuing to grow the Pilates Teacher Mastermind program. I am continuing to grow the Strong Bones online Pilates programs. I am teaching mat classes at Bombshell. So if you're interested in taking group classes with me, you could just go to Bombshell Pilates and check out the class schedule. Still living in Lower Manhattan, still in the same apartment. I actually just renewed my lease for 2 years. So here we are down by the Brooklyn Bridge, not going anywhere in the near future. And I'm just happy hanging out here with my hubby, hanging out here with Juniper Peanut, our rescue dog, and teaching the Pilates, which is what I love to do. And I am also, starting to do interviews for this podcast for the upcoming year, for the upcoming season, and thinking about podcast topics. Now, if you have any podcast topics that you think, might be useful and interesting here, come on over to pilatesgoddess.com and either send me a message or leave me a voicemail and let me know what you'd like to hear me do, what you'd like to see me do. So moving on. Today's topic is programming Pilates classes. And yes, as usual, I came up with this topic from hanging out and giving some advice and getting some advice on different Reddit groups and Facebook groups for Pilates instructors, and also some for Pilates consumers, because it is always interesting to hear what the people taking the classes, taking the Pilates, have to say. Now, there is a glut of Pilates teachers on the market right now. And I don't mean that in any kind of pejorative way. I simply mean that there are a lot of teacher training programs out there. There are a lot more people doing Pilates, particularly mat and group reformer. And there are more people going into Pilates teacher training programs. So there are a ton of teachers out on the market right now who are either brand new or have only been teaching for a few months or maybe a couple of years. And again, that's fine. No shade on anybody who wants to teach the Pilates and help people feel and function better, because, I think it's a great thing. But we do need to have some quality control in the marketplace, and customers need to recognize that what they're doing is Pilates and not just stuff made up on Pilates equipment, or a different exercise that's not Pilates, but we're going to call it Pilates because we're doing it in a Pilates class. So let's just start with programming Pilates mat classes. That, is what most Pilates teachers are called to do, whether you're teaching in a studio or teaching on your own. A lot of times, like when I taught in the Caribbean, I taught a class 6 days a week, and a lot of times I had repeat people in those classes. So you kind of end up in this position, especially as a new teacher, right? Where you're kind of worried that people won't love your class. You're worried that you have to do new and different things in every single class, or people will somehow get bored or they won't come back. And you haven't necessarily been taught the actual, like, Joseph Pilates created exercises with their modifications and variations. You have most likely also been taught other exercises that are not really Pilates, but that your training organization or studio where you train decided to put into the mix because they're commonly done. And this, my friends, happens a lot. And I'm going to just give you some basic examples, like the clamshell. Okay, the clamshell exercise where you're on your side, you keep your heels together, your knees are bent at 90 degrees, and you're just lifting one knee, is not a Pilates exercise. And in fact, I don't like doing it because I feel like it tightens my rotators in a way that's not very productive, and does it to other people as well. In fact, I had an entire discussion with a colleague who takes my online classes about why I don't teach clamshell and what I prefer to teach instead, and why. As far as I'm concerned, this is just an aside, as long as you have a really good reason for doing or not doing something, and it's a reason that people can understand, and it's a reason that makes, even a tiny bit of sense, you're going to be in a much better place than many exercise instructors out there. So, as you probably know, if you teach Pilates or have done Pilates, Pilates was created by a man called Joseph Pilates. He called it Contrology. We changed it back to his name, later on in the time frame. But he created mat exercises, and he created mat exercises that are documented. He put them in a book called Return to Life, and that go in a very specific order that essentially starts with the 100 and ends with the push-up. And you may think to yourself, God, how can people just continue to do those same exercises like all the time? Don't they get ridiculously bored? But they really don't. And I've been doing those exercises for like 36 years now. and I don't get bored. It's kind of like asking, do you get bored walking? Do you get bored doing squats? Do you get bored, doing other forms of exercise? Like it's Pilates and that's what you do. Kind of like you go into a yoga class, you're going to expect to maybe do a sun salutation. You might expect that you're going to do some cat and cow and some down dog. You might expect that you're going to do a little cobra. You might be doing a little bridging, spine twisting. It's like there's just certain things that will come up in a specific class or a specific genre of class. So, in Pilates, I get a little bit disturbed, like if the 100 doesn't show up somewhere toward the beginning of class or the beginning of a series, because within the structure of classical Pilates, the 100 comes at the very beginning. So essentially, if as a teacher, you approach your classes as, okay, I know these exercises and I know their names, I know their order, and I know how to do them. And not only do I know how to do them and teach them, but I also know how to break them down so that if somebody's having an issue or somebody can't do something, or I have a very beginner class or a very beginner people mixed with, advanced people like I would get at the hotel, I can still hold to this framework of exercises, but maybe do a few different versions within that framework of the exercises. Um, and you'll see Pilates teachers doing this all the time. Like we'll get people, say, into position for the aforementioned 100, and we'll say, if your lower back is lifting up, your legs are going down a little too far away from your body, bring them back up. If you're feeling a lot of strain through your upper thigh and you're not really feeling the work in your abdominals, maybe keep your heels together and bend your knees and bring your legs a little bit closer to your body. If your neck is hurting, you can either put your head all the way down, or we can look at the position that you're in when you're curling that head up and talk about, better positioning for the head and shoulders when you're curled up into that flexion. I mean, there's, a lot of stuff you can do with that. You can make the breathing slower or faster. You can do a 4 in, 6 out instead of 5 and 5. You see what I'm doing? You can play with that. But as a teacher, I know going into class, say, I'm thinking, what do people need? I teach beginning classes now, like every Tuesday night from 6 to 6:45 at Bombshell Pilates. So, I deal with this a lot. I get a lot of these women who are just coming off of work. They're a little stressed out. Some of them do Pilates regularly, most don't. Although some of them are class pass people. So, they are avid exercisers. They oftentimes don't have great posture because they're sitting at desks all day or they're on their phones all the time. So, I have them come in and I'm going to talk you through sort of my thought process in the class, right? So they come in, I have them lie down, we do some breathing, we do a little pelvic tuck and arch to kind of get them feeling, the neutral pelvis and the heaviness in their sacrum. We might do some knee folds, singles and then doubles. We might do some arm circles and maybe just some shoulder blade movements, forward and backward, up and down and around. We might do some small bridging and maybe some curling up the upper body just to feel what that feels like before we get involved in an exercise per se. And then I take them into the 100. And they get right into it right after that relatively brief warm up. Okay. Because the 100 really is a warm up. I mean, think about it. You're in a static position, you're breathing, you're pumping the arms. You might be playing with your leg position, but essentially you're just trying to hold your legs up, have your upper body up, get some good deep breaths in as the arms are moving to help activate the muscles around your rib cage. It's a perfect warm up if you think about it. Okay. You can do it with the head down if you're really worried about too much upper body flexion, right? Not a problem. And I'll see how they do with that. And if everyone's really okay with that, they're feeling it in their abs, they're tired, whatever, fine. And then depending on how they're moving, how tight they are, if they've had any back issues or whatever, maybe I'll go for the roll back instead of the full roll up. Right? So the roll back is where you start sitting with the knees bent and you roll back as far as you can, being able to roll back up again. And then you kind of keep increasing the length and the distance, right? Until you're in the full roll up. They're usually in the full roll up by the end of that, interlude. I'm not going to teach a beginning class rollover, but I will give them some bridging. And it's kind of nice to do some bridging before you do the leg circles and that kind of stabilization work that does involve some hamstring flexibility and some strength in the hip flexors and the quads and all the muscles in your torso that are holding the rest of your body steady so that your leg can move. But do you see how I don't have to essentially worry about what comes next because I know what comes next in the mat, right? So they get done with their leg circles and then it's time for rolling like a ball. So again, if I've got some folks with osteoporosis or some upper back stuff in the class, I might give them a modification, which could be, say, heels together, toes apart, knees a little bit apart, heels on the mat, keeping the upper body chest lifted, tucking the pelvis a little, and just curling back away from the legs and coming back up. For other folks, I might start them with rolling with the hands underneath their thighs and then move them to the full version of holding the fronts of the ankles. And I have to tell you that even when people can't do the exercise and they're totally flailing around, they have a really good time and they have fun with it because suddenly they see that it's a progressive exercise and that they could have fun with it. Right? Then we get done with that. We go into the ab series. I give them whatever combination I feel like will be useful and challenging for the ab series. That is 5 exercises. So, you have options there for doing just the core 2, which would be the single and the double leg stretch, or whether you want to add in all 5. Right? Then you've got your seated work. You got your spine stretch. And, spine stretch can be difficult, but even if you just work on getting people to sit up really, really tall and do a tiny little hinging stretch, it's at least something that gets them moving and feeling their spines in that position. Then maybe we do an open leg balance just for fun there. Maybe we do an open leg rocker, again, depending on the group. I won't always do saw with a new group, but I will do some form of spine twist, right? I won't always do, and actually before that, I wouldn't always do corkscrew with a brand new group. But if there's people in the class who have done Pilates before and they're strong, I might give them a small corkscrew, just a circle around the pelvis. Why not? Okay. Then we know that after saw, we come onto the stomach. I will many times give them some fundamental exercises here as well. We might start with some just prone leg lifts, some prone upper body lifts, the fundamental flight, if you've done any physical mind training, which is kind of like pull straps. I then might give them a small swan. I usually always do single leg kick because I think it's great for everybody. Then I might do just the leaning back and coming up of the neck pull just to get that kind of feeling of the difference between having your arms moving in the roll up as opposed to hands behind the head. And then we'll do some of the side kicks. Maybe we'll play with a little beginning teaser. Then we'll go into swimming. We will go into seal or some, modification or variation of seal. And then I will bring them up for some kind of standing work. If they're a group that I think is fine with doing the push-ups, then I'll have them do the rolling down and at least the walking out to plank or the plank position to go into push-ups. And if they want to do a push-up there, they can, or they could just come right back. And then I might say, get some small hand weights. And we all know we don't all know the standing hand weight series. It's a problem. But if you did know the standing hand weight series, or you do know the Pilates hand weight series, then I might have them come up and do some of the bicep curls, do the side bicep curls, maybe do some shaving and hug and a little bit of chest expansion. And then they go and everyone feels great and is really happy. Now, you may be sitting there like, Lynda, how did you just spout out like an entire class with modifications and variations in, 10 minutes of just sitting at your desk? And the reason why I can do that is because I know the Pilates fundamental exercises, i.e., I know the most modified versions of any movement, and I know the full mat. So it is then very easy for me to just take those mat exercises in order, decide which ones I want to do, don't do, which ones I want to modify, which ones I want to vary, and give people a great class. And it is going to be a similar class week to week. It is not going to be the exact same class. But people don't mind having a metric because if you give people, and I've said this before on this podcast, if you give people different exercises every time, they don't know if they're getting any better at anything. Okay, the only way you know you're getting better at something is if you repeat it and then you know it. So I feel you if you're a newer teacher and you're like, why won't these people remember? Why aren't they getting it in their body? What is going on here? But it's partly because even if you're not doing it, they may be going to other Pilates teachers who are giving them different things in different orders, in different ways every single class. So no, they don't get it because they haven't been given anything to get. Okay, and that's really what we need to understand here. Now, the same thing works on the reformer. On reformer, there is also a classical Joseph Pilates order of the exercises. In fact, there are several. It seems that for at least a few of the Pilates elders who work directly with Joe, he seemed to have changed some of the order, but not drastically. And it could also be how people remember the order that was given to them. So, but if you know that, for example, you get on the reformer, the first thing you're doing is footwork, then you're sitting there. You don't have to worry about that whole beginning of class. If you want to add some single leg variations, if you want to add a second position and not just do the 3 classical positions, whatever it is you like to do there, you're starting with footwork. What comes after footwork? The 100. Now, if you want to do some arm presses with the straps, some arm circles, some other things while you're there, great. But then you're doing the 100, right? Then you are doing frog and leg circles or short spine. Then you are doing, depending on level, you might be doing coordination. You might be doing rowing, but you know that there's an order and what comes next in that order. Do I choose sometimes to do things in a slightly different order? Yes, I do, but I always have a reason. Do I sometimes choose to skip an exercise altogether? I do, but once again, I always have a reason. But this way, you're not standing there every class going, oh shit, what are we going to do next? Okay. Or how am I going to change this in my brain from a beginning class to an intermediate class to an advanced class? It becomes easier when you have kind of memorized the exercises in the order, which I know seems really boring and constraining. You're just like, no, I want to be creative. I don't want to learn the order. But I can promise you, seriously, I promise you that your creative freedom will really come out once you know the exercises and you know the order of the exercises. Because only then will your brain free up enough space while you're teaching to be like, hey, rowing comes next on the reformer. Maybe we'll do it with hand weights today. Maybe we'll do it on a heavier or lighter spring today. Maybe we'll just do the back rowing. Maybe we'll just do the front rowing. Whatever that looks like for you. You get to the long box. You're like, is this class doing swan on the long box? Well, maybe not the advanced swan on the long box, but could they do the modified version where they're on their stomachs with a sticky pad under them, and their head is towards the foot bar, and you're doing it mostly with arms and with upper body and upper back? Probably. All right, so we're going to do that. Awesome. Pull straps and T comes next. Great. Let's do that. Oh, you can't get on your stomach on the box? Great. Sit on the box and you can still do the same movements of pull straps and T. Okay. So again, it's in knowing that structure that then gives you the creativity to be able to think on your feet while you're teaching. And this, my friends, is the piece of the puzzle that a lot of teacher training programs aren't teaching. Okay. So if you've been through a whole teacher training program and you don't know this, it's not necessarily your fault, right? I mean, you could have been taught this, but understanding how to just think on your feet is really the most crucial thing. And that way, if somebody comes in and they're like, oh, I don't get on my stomach, or I don't like to do this, or I don't like to do that, you could just be like, awesome, we're doing this exercise, and you could just do it in this different relationship to gravity. You don't want to be on your knees for doing chest expansion on the reformer. You could do it standing at the spring wall. If you're in a club Pilates studio, you could do it sitting on the box. Okay, so you could do it sitting on the carriage. There are a lot of different ways to do it, but you need to have that underlying knowledge of what the order of the exercises is for that particular piece of equipment. Now, some pieces of equipment don't really have an order, right? The Cadillac is one of those. The chair has a little bit more of an order, but it's much less set in stone than the mat and reformer. But since, and I kind of hate to say this, but it's true, since so many new Pilates teachers are only learning mat and reformer, especially at the very beginning, that's really where you should be learning this structure. And the sad thing is that most mat and reformer certification programs are not teaching classical work, so they're not necessarily teaching the order of the exercises or necessarily the breakdowns of how to modify and vary. Now, if this is something that really interests you, learning the classical order, learning how to break down the exercises, learning how to work with basically anybody who walks into your class at a moment's notice without freaking out. I would love for you to join me in Pilates Teacher Mastermind VIP. This is my signature program for Pilates teachers. This is all we do in that program. Now we don't. We do a lot of other stuff too. We talk about business. We talk about mindset. We talk about how to set your prices, how to find your clients, how to market, how to run your business. But we do a lot about how to teach Pilates, modifications, variations, special populations. But I base what we do in Pilates Teacher Mastermind around making sure that the Pilates teachers who are in my program walk away with a solid understanding of the classical system and why it's important to have that understanding. You know, I was a philosophy and women's studies professor for a while before I became a full-time Pilates teacher. And even there, you still have to take in graduate school for philosophy preliminary exams. And the preliminary exams are the same for you, whether you come in specializing in ethics or feminism or epistemology or metaphysics, whether you want to read ancient Greek philosophy, whether you want to only read contemporary philosophy, whether you are into Derrida and deconstructionism, whatever it looks like, you still have to show the same proficiency in understanding the history of philosophy. So you have to take these written exams, basically just drilling down on the history of philosophy. So talking about pre-Socratics, talking about Plato, talking about Aristotle, basically going through the history of the major philosophers, and you have to show that you can coherently answer questions and talk about them and what they spouted and what they believed and how these thoughts and theories kind of, work their way through society and through the history of thought. So I feel like learning the basics of classical Pilates is kind of incumbent in a way upon any Pilates teacher, because you're teaching the Joseph Pilates work. Whether you want to teach a super dolled up contemporary version of it, or you want to just teach on Gratz and be purely classical, you're still teaching something called Pilates. And if you're doing that, I feel that you owe it to yourself, and you owe it to your clients to at least know the core of what Joseph Pilates taught. And if you're not teaching those exercises or teaching in that way, to at least have an understanding of why that is. So that's it, actually, from me for today. We've gone about half an hour, which is longer than I was planning on going, but you know me when I get started. So thanks again. And this coming Thursday, we're going to be back for an interview. And I'm actually very excited to release this interview with Karen Pudetti, who is a brilliant spa owner and business strategist. And we are going to be talking about ways to build and grow your business, whether you're a spa owner, a Pilates teacher, a gym owner, whatever it is that you're doing in the wellness, health, and service industry. And you're going to get a lot out of what Karen has to say. So you guys, thank you once again so much for showing up, so much for listening. And I will talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.